What's up, ladies and gentlemen? All right, time for another Q&A. I am very excited because this one I was able to get ready and prepare. It actually got some of the math questions, something I've been wanting to do for a while now. And I do apologize for some of you that have sent over math questions. I am not going to get back to them in a timely manner, but I am going to hold on to my end of the promise, I guess, and I will answer as many of the questions that I possibly can. And even on this live stream, I'll be getting some to your math questions. And if you have your own math question, then you can definitely go ahead and submit it at brianmclogan.com/Q&A. And I will try to do my best to get to all of your guys' questions. But if you have anything in general around math or whatever may be the case, then just feel free to always just put it into the chat. I can go ahead and click on it just like this and bring that question up. Ying Yang Boy, I don't have any questions, but I want to let you know you helped me a lot through my academic life. I wanted to come here and properly thank you for your effort. Thank you for your best. Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that. And it's Jay Kraft. Good to have you on. Thank you so much for joining in. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat. I'm not going to go through anything else structured for in this video, just really just kind of getting into your guys' questions. And then I do have some math questions that I'm going to get to, but I always like taking questions in from you guys inside on the chat first, and then we'll kind of get into those as well. Hey, Brianna Hart. I think that's the first way I've ever seen Brianna spelled like that. I like that. Fatima, good to have you on. Thank you so much. All right. You know what? It was actually kind of funny. I created a video, or I was starting to map out a video because I think one of the most common questions I get is like, what are some tips for algebra 1, tips for algebra 2, calculus, like computer programming? And I'm like, the same questions are, I mean, the same tips and everything else is going to be all exactly the same. But I'm going to make a video on it, a long form video. But I'll just kind of give you the tips because, Brianna, you asked the question. So I think it's fair enough to kind of give you some answers. But it's, you know, it's kind of basic answers. All right. And the stuff you already know. But I think sometimes when you just hear it, it's like, okay, maybe it kind of sometimes hits a little bit differently. So, tips for your math class, no matter what your math class is. I think the first thing is you got to do the work. And I know that that sounds really, really easy. But what I mean by just like doing the work is even if you don't understand it at that moment in time, that's okay. But make sure you go through the work that has been assigned. There is a reason that your teacher has assigned a certain amount of work. And I think what happens so often with students is, especially with students when they start to struggle, is they just kind of do what they need to do to get by, and then they move on to the next thing. And it's like, all right, what do I need to study, cram, whatever for this test? And then they move by. And maybe there are some questions they didn't know how to do. And they're just like, forget about it. I'm just going to keep on. I'm not going to worry about it. Right. It didn't show up on the quiz. It didn't show up on the test. I'm not going to do it. No, everything that has been assigned that's in your book that you're going over, make sure that you understand how to do. Make sure that you go through the work. And one of the best ways that you can go around this is what we call like a spiral review. Always be going back to chapter 1, chapter 2, all this older stuff. And maybe there was a really hard problem that you didn't understand that was really, really confusing to you. And you're able to move on, you're able to pass the chapter, whatever, and move on to the next one. Well, spend some extra time, a couple weeks, a couple months later, and going back over that stuff. Constantly be reviewing that. The last thing you guys want to be thinking about as you are entering in, this final exam season is like, oh crap, what did we learn in chapter 2? Like, this is not the time to be doing a review. You want to be doing spiral review throughout the whole year. So just don't let some question that you didn't understand or that was really difficult at the beginning of the year and just give up on it and never go back to it. Make sure that you are doing the work. Do all of the assigned work, and make sure that you consistently are reviewing all of that material. And here's the obvious one. And thank you so much for all of you that are joining on. If you guys have questions or have submitted a question, but when you start to struggle, ask questions. I can't tell you how many times I had students that would struggle in my class, or didn't get grades that they wanted, but they never seeked help from me. Always ask questions. And I know sometimes it gets embarrassing when we're in class. We don't want to raise our hand. We don't want to feel like we don't understand or we're stupid or anything else. But find a time, during lunch or after school or before school that you can speak with your teacher, that you can ask questions. Find somebody that you can confide with your misunderstandings. It could be a friend. It could be a student that's already taken the class. But whatever it is, make sure that you are getting your questions answered. because that is going to help you be able to understand everything. And if you're just going to, move on and say, oh, well, it's not that important anyways, all that stuff, what that has is like that, it festers, it grows on you. And then as you're going through like later in the year, those misunderstandings, those holes in your knowledge, they keep on expanding, they get in worse and worse. So we don't want that to happen. And the last thing I think that's another thing is to, focus on improving, focus on taking little baby steps. No matter what you're doing in your class, even if you are, trying to get an A or just trying to pass the class, just try to keep on doing a little bit better each and every class. I think sometimes students have, like when we do goals in my class, students have this high need that they're like, I have to get an A or I have to get such a grade. And the reality is sometimes you're not going to get always the A. You're going to get some D's, you're going to get some B's, you're going to get some C's, but just keep on trying to improve yourself. Keep on trying to get to be a better student, a better version of yourself. Don't focus on what other students are in your class, or, how people did that you're friends with, just focus on getting better throughout the year. Focus on becoming a better student. And the last tip that I can recommend to you is don't go about school alone. You don't have to study by yourself. You don't have to do your homework by yourself. One of the greatest things that I found out is I never did this in high school, and that's when I struggled with math. But when I went to college and I really took my math seriously, I went to the tutor lab every single day, and that's where I did my math. I was always with the tutors and everything else. And a lot of times I didn't need them, but if I had a question or if I wanted some clarification, I had people there right next to me. Once I got into more upper level mathematics classes, they didn't have tutors for those. So I was always in a study group. I always would do my homework and I'd study with a partner. And one, it just made math so much more enjoyable to have somebody with you that's kind of going through the experience. They also understand that from the lectures something differently than the way you understood it. So you could actually have some conversations to make sense of things. Because I've been there. I've been at home all by myself, staring at my textbook, trying to make sense of things and like being like, I'm just confused. I have something else better to do. And I wasn't in school when we had a cell phone. And I probably would have been way more distracted if I'd be like, why am I doing my homework when I can just do something more enjoyable, right? If I can get that quick dopamine and do something on my phone rather than doing my math homework. Thankfully, that was not around when I was trying to do this. But I think it's really helpful if you can find somebody to work with or a group. That will help you, I think, when the times get tough, to keep on persevering. So that would be my advice for any math class that you guys are taking. And so if somebody asks this question later in the chat, I'll just say, watch the beginning of the stream. All right. Let's go back up to for you guys. Hey, Super Mario. My daughter's actually just started playing Nintendo Switch, and they're all into Mario and stuff like that. Hope you're doing amazing, Sunday. I do have a question. Is the same arc sine versus sine inverse, or do we have to give different answers? No, that's just the different representation, but the exact same meaning. I don't know. Why is intro to physics so hard? I don't know. I don't know why intro to physics is so hard, but I didn't really enjoy physics as much as I thought I would. Well, awesome, Renz. Good to have you on. If you have a quiz, if you have an identity that you want me to solve, then go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. I will actually, let me see if I can pull it up here for you. So therefore you guys will know. Where is those? There it is. Let's go and see. There you go. So if you have a question, go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. All right. That's for any math questions. Sorry for India. I took a science stream. I'm not sure what that is, but now I'm struggling with my stream. I don't understand maths and chemistry mainly. I'm not sure what exactly the stream means. If you can maybe elaborate. That's not something I'm familiar with. I do not have any book recommendations, but I know the Math Sorcerer YouTube channel. He has a lot of book like reviews and stuff. I'd maybe check out his if you haven't already. Do you have any tips for the SAT? Yes, I have quite a few tips for the SAT. I think for the SAT, the ACT, and now it's a little bit different with this new online that they're doing. I'm not really sure how the prep materials are going to differ because that is a little bit different mindset now you need to approach with something, taking something online rather than paper and pencil. However, I still think the types of questions and what you're going to face is going to be very, very similar. My best piece of recommendation I can give you for taking an online or taking an assessment is to do as many practice problems as possible. And thankfully for the ACT, the SAT, AP Calculus, AP Pre-Calculus, any of those, major assessments, they have a lot of practice problems for you to practice with. Do as many of them as you possibly can. Do like 10, 20 a day and just keep on working through as many as you can because I think, you're basically just gaming the system. You're playing the game. And there's some good and some bad, with these assessments, but I think the better you can be prepared for taking the test, just the better you're going to do. And how do you get prepared? Practicing, practicing, practicing. It's not fun. It's not exciting, but I think that's one of the best things you can do. Algebra 3 is so bad. What do you recommend, sir? Maybe go back through, do some spiral review of Algebra 1, Algebra 2. I'm not sure exactly the content in the Algebra 3, but you're probably missing some stuff that you're not connecting to what you previously learned. So I would maybe just recommend doing some soft spiral reviews of Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, and you'll see how some of that is connected with Algebra 3. Not a whole bunch of time. Don't spend a whole bunch of time on it, but it is something that I think that you can easily embed into your program of doing like 10, 15 minutes of review and, of every night and being able to just kind of keep things fresh in your brain. I think that would help you out. How do you restrict the domain? That's a great question because you can restrict the domain in many different ways. Typically on a problem, I'm trying to think. Well, I'm thinking of like the square root, function. It's basically you're going to want to look into, what the graph originally is looking at or look at how the range is restricted. And then that's what you're going to apply for the domain restriction is, because remember when you are doing the inverse, and I'm assuming that's maybe what you're referring to, but when you're taking the inverse of a function, you got to look at what restrictions you previously have on the range, and then you can apply that to the domain. And I think that would apply for most functions. I'm just thinking of the square root function. But if you have something more specific, then go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I'll be happy to take a look at it. All right, let me see what they have here. We have 2 streams in India, BBC, which is biology, physics, and chem, and MPC, which is maths, physics, and chem. That's basically what the stream is. Oh, okay. So let me see. What was your previous question? I don't see your previous question. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I missed a whole bunch of you guys. I was wondering about that. How to expand, submit that to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. No, probably been way too long since I did some linear programming from on there. Nope, been way too long since I've gone over anything with that, but feel free to submit the questions. I'll go and take a look at it. Well, awesome, Fadu. I'm very happy to help you out. Any math questions, submit to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. I thought I had yours. All right, I'll maybe get back to it. Can I ask a problem about where you have 2 vertical asymptotes? Is there a way to know the behavior of the graph between them without plugging in a bunch of points? Yes and no. I think you need to understand that your graph is always going to be approaching those asymptotes. But yeah, there's a couple different curves where you could have I'm thinking if you have 2 vertical asymptotes, it could be an S curve in between those 2, or it could be a parabola. And I think if you I would recommend using Desmos and maybe looking at by changing the powers, in the numerator and denominator of your functions and kind of seeing how that changes from S curve to quadratic. And you'll probably recognize maybe some patterns in there. But still, my recommendation, I'm not aware of any specific rule for on there. I'm sure there probably is some mathematical thing that you can be able to identify. But if you just pick a couple points between those between if you pick a couple points between your asymptotes, you should be able to identify like, all right, here's the shape of it. It's definitely going to be approaching these two asymptotes. It's either going to look like an S curve, if like positive and negative, or both positive, both negative Y values. And then you can kind of go from there. I've struggled with math this year, and this is the first year that I've been doing decent at math in a while. We have EOC soon. I've been working hard and praying, but I still have a little doubt. Totally normal, and congrats to you for like sticking with it. Keep on trying and, just keep on putting in the work and do the best you can. And you know what? If you maybe don't get as good a grade as you thought, that's okay. You did a lot of work. You put your time and your effort into this year, and congrats to that, right? I mean, that's good. And just keep on building off that. Don't let a grade define you. Congrats to you for, having your success this year, and hopefully that will pan out on and show for your ESCs. But if it doesn't, don't let that define you. Keep on working hard and keep on improving. You know what? I doing infant series and sequences. I didn't actually have to teach that from on there, so I don't have any direct tips for you. But yeah, it's good to have you on, and hope you're doing well. And a calculator 2 out of 4. No, I mean, you should be able to. I'm assuming just be able to graph it from on there. But actually, I don't have my calculator next to me. But you should be able to graph. I don't know what an issue would be for that. All right. Go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A for some math stuff. I will be getting to some math questions that I was able to for people that submitted them, and I'm going to go ahead and post them up there as well. Is there a fast way to know the behavior of a graph between two vertical asymptotes? I mean, you just know they need to approach those two asymptotes. Oh, no, I saw your comment. And yes, I thought I read back over. I had to go back over. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them that like skipped over for some reason. But I do apologize that, and I really appreciate you giving me your comment. Currently struggling with my calculus courses. I don't know what to do. Where do you think I can find practice problems or ways of remembering solving techniques? My exam is tomorrow. Oh, I mean, hopefully you have some stuff from your teacher. I wouldn't be worried too much about online resources at this moment. I would just go back through your quizzes, your homeworks, your tests, and just review the stuff that you've already gone through on your class. Sometimes some online courses or online material is great, but I wouldn't focus on that stuff at the moment right now. I would just focus in on what you've already taken for your class. I am not sure. Well, thank you, Said. Good to have you on. Best way, I think being consistent with your studying, doing a spiral review, and then creating a cheat sheet, which is basically a summary of the most important things that you have learned, and then constantly reviewing them. It's pretty simple, guys, but if you can remain consistent with your studying and always be studying older stuff, that's that review. I think that can help benefit you the best for preparing. Yep, that is correct. Yes, I can. Go and submit it to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. Using how to take the integral using the limit definition. I would just probably start with YouTube. See, I'm sure there's some amazing people that have some. I don't think I have any videos on it, but start from there, and then go from your teacher or tutor and stuff like that, and have somebody that you can work with step by step. Well, awesome. Science Rules, good to have you on and happy to be able to help you out. All right, guys, I am very excited for this because I am ready to get into some math. And if you have any non-math questions, then feel free to add them into the chat. Once I'm done with this, I will be more than happy to go back through to answer some of your questions. But if you have a math question, then go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I'll answer your questions there. But now it's time to get some maths. I mean, it's really hard to give you some advice, which I don't know what you're struggling with. So if you want to maybe let me know what you're struggling with, then I can kind of maybe advise my help that way, but I'm not really sure. So feel free to maybe elaborate if you can. All right. Yeah, I know there's a lot. There's a lot of people with some midterms. That's awesome though. Love it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into some math. All right, first one is we have x plus 1/2 y equals 1. I have to graph it. I have to graph it on a graph, please. All right. So I think the easiest thing that we always want to be able to do when we have to be able to graph this is just to put it into slope-intercept form. All right. So we have x plus 1/2 y equals 1. So basically what we want to do is we want to isolate this, right? We want to put this in the form of y equals an mx plus b. So what we need to do is understand there's two things that are happening to the graph. This graph or the variable, it's being multiplied by 1/2 and it's being added by x, right? Because technically that's a positive x. You could also rewrite it like this: 1/2 y plus x is equal to a 1. All right. So the reason why that is important is because I want you to be able to see that the x is positive. So when we want to get rid of adding an x, we're going to subtract an x on both sides. That is going to leave us with a 1/2 y is equal to a negative x plus 1. Now, why am I writing plus 1? Because that's a positive 1, right? Just like that's a positive x, you can see we can rewrite this, and typically we rewrite the number in front of the variable. You could write that as a 1 minus x, though. It's the same thing as 1 minus x is negative x plus 1, all right? The x is negative, the 1 is positive. So either version is going to be correct. But just remember, we always want to use inverse operations. We always want to undo addition and subtraction before we undo multiplication and division when we are solving for a variable. Now we need to go ahead and get rid of multiplying by 1/2. So you could divide by 1/2, which is the same thing as multiply, or which is the opposite of multiplying 1/2. Or you can recognize that dividing by 1/2 is the same thing as multiplying by a 2 or a 2/1. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides, and I'm going to put these in parentheses. Now I don't really need to write the 2/1, but I always like to do that just so you guys can see, oh yeah, that's going to multiply by my reciprocal. And then over here, just make sure you multiply that 2 times both terms. So we have 2/1 times negative x, which is a negative 2x, and 2 times 1 is going to be a positive 2. All right, so now let's go and graph it. Now let's understand our points of the graph. So this is going to be our slope, right? Which is going to be our rate of change. And this is going to be our y-intercept. That's where the graph is going to cross the y-axis. So let's go ahead and create an xy axis here. So that's going to be our y. That's going to be our x. So we go to 2. So here's the y-axis. So we're going to go positive 2. And we can just label that with a little dot. And then we have the slope is negative 2. So it's important to recognize that this can be represented as a negative 2/1, which is the same thing as a 2 over a negative 1. Just for the love of mathematics, do not do a negative 2 over a negative 1, because that would be a positive 2, right? So it doesn't matter if you have the negative in the numerator or the denominator, you just need to pick one, all right? And so remember, this represents our slope as the rise over the run. Between any 2 points, you're going to have a change in the y direction of 2 and a change in the horizontal direction, which is called the run, of 1. So to get to this point, I can go down 2 and then to the right 1, or I could go up 2 to the left 1. Doesn't matter, but you can see now I have 3 points that are going to lie on the line. So just pick one of them. It doesn't really matter, but you want to be able to at least get 2 points, just so therefore you can connect them and then just extend. And that is what that graph is going to look like. All right. For the next one, it says, for the video on asymptotes of geometry, I still don't get what n is, and n can be confusing. So let's go ahead and talk about tan. So y equals a tangent of x. And so that graph looks something like this, or at least the initial period looks like this. And so this is going to be at a pi halves, and this is at a negative pi halves. That's 0. Okay, now here's the important thing. What happens? This graph repeats, right? So there's these asymptotes here. That's going to keep on going in the positive as well as in the negative direction. So what is the one thing we know about this? We know that the the distance between one asymptote to the next asymptote is going to be pi, right? So what we can write here is I can say, all right, where are the asymptotes occurring? The asymptotes occurring are at x equals a pi halves. Now, for me to write all of the asymptotes, that would that'd be infinite because they're going infinitely to the right and infinitely to the left. So what we want to do is be able to represent this to a way to be able to create an equation that's going to represent all of the asymptotes. So we have pi halves. Now, if I add a pi, that is going to, like if I add a pi to this, that takes me to right here. If I add 2 pi, that's going to take me right here. 3 pi, take me to the next one. 4 pi, 5 pi. Well, what about if I added a negative pi or subtracted a pi, right? That would take me right here. So what I want you to see here is I can multiply by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or -1, -2, -3, -4. The number in front of pi is going to represent any integer. Now, no matter what number I place into there, that's always going to take me to a new asymptote. So that is why when we use this equation, we write this as plus a pi, I don't know why I erased that, pi n, where n represents any integer. So n is equal to an integer, right? An integer is going to be like your negative numbers, your positive numbers, negative or positive whole numbers, all right? Even picking 0, like what if you put 0? 0 times pi is 0 plus pi halves, right there, right? What if it was 1? It'd be pi halves plus pi. Pi halves plus pi takes me there, right? So no matter what number is in front of there, it's always going to take you to an asymptote. Even if it was a -1, if n is -1, that's an integer. -1 times pi, that negative pi plus pi halves is a negative pi halves. Hey, look, it's right there. So n is just going to represent any integer, and that is going to take us to a representation for any asymptote that we want. All right, let's get into the next one. This student was actually asking me to find the zeros, but they're asking me to find the zeros, I think, or they wanted this to be factored. Now, when you're dealing with cubics, that can be very, very difficult. A cubic expression. The first thing I always look for is, can you factor it by grouping? And in this case, I cannot factor it by grouping. So therefore, I'm kind of stuck. There is a little way, a little cheat code that we can do. We can go ahead and find the integers, or I'm sorry, the zeros of this, and then go ahead and multiply those zeros back out to be able to get this expression. So here's a great little tip. What you're going to want to do, though, is find a 0. Now, if you have a graphing calculator or you have technology, you can simply just graph this and find the integers. But if you don't have that, then you can just use synthetic division to be able to see if we have any integers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a potential 0, and potential 0 is going to come from the rational 0 test, right? That's going to be factors of your constant over the factors of your leading coefficient. So plus or minus. So we have plus or minus 10, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 1. We're going to test all of them. I always like to start with a 1 and a -1. So let's do this. Let's start with a 1. So I'm going to take my coefficient, right? That's a 1. So I have a 1. We have 8. I don't know why I did a plus. So we have a 1, 8, 17, and a 10. Now, if we get 0 at the end, that means it has a remainder. That means 1 is going to be a 0 of my polynomial function. I'll show you what to do after that. So let's see, we bring down the 1. So 1 times 1 is 1. 8 plus 1 is 9. 9 times 1 is going to be a 9. 17 plus 9 is a 26. 26 times 1 is a 26. That's going to be a 36. That's a remainder. Doesn't work. So now let's go do -1. So same coefficients. All right, so bring down the 1. 1 times -1 is going to be a -1. 8 plus -1 is going to be a positive 7. 7 times -1 is going to be a -7. 17 plus -7 is going to be a positive 10. 10 times -1 is a -10. And holy moly, ladies and gentlemen, look what we got. We have a remainder of 0. So what that means is that is going to be a remainder, that is going to be your constant, that is going to be your linear, and that's going to be your quadratic. So what we have here is this is going to be a 0. So x equals -1 is going to be 0, right? So we can say x equals a -1 is going to be a 0. Now, why is that important? If x equals -1 is a 0, that means x plus 1 is going to be a factor. And then your quotient is going to be your other factor. So let's see if we can factor that down. That's going to be a x squared plus a 7x plus 10. Right? So that's a factor, x plus 1, times that. And this equals my original problem, which is x cubed plus an 8x squared plus a 17x. Was it plus 10? Yeah, plus 10. Okay, so we factor this down. What two numbers multiply to give you 10, add to give you 7? Hey, 5 and 2. So guess what? X plus 1 times x plus 2 times an x plus 5. And that is going to be your factored form. So if it's not something that seems easy to factor by potentially grouping, one way you can do is go ahead and find the zeros and then use synthetic division to help you go ahead and break down the polynomial, so therefore you can further factor it down. All right, word problems. I hate word problems. I usually don't answer word problems, but I don't know. For this time I felt, well, it would be a good time to go ahead and give it a shot. Because it seemed like these are a very confident one that happens a lot, so I figure I'll go through this. You earn $12 an hour working at a local grocery store. You are required to work at the grocery store for at least 8 hours per week. You also tutor for $15 per hour. You earn at least $150 per week, but you do not want to work more than 20 hours per week. Define your variables. I love that. That's the first thing I always tell students to do for a word problem anyways, is what are your variables? So it says you earn $12 per hour working at a grocery store. You're required to work at the grocery store for at least 8 hours per week. So you also tutor for 15 hours per hour. You need to learn at least $150 per week, but you do not want to work more than 20 hours per week. All right. So what we're going to do is, so you have, man, this is why I hate the thing. I looked at this question. I was like, oh yeah, this is not going to be fine. Hold on, now I got to read. Now I got my live stream, and now my brain has a fart because I was thinking of something else. $100 per week. You have to earn the 20 hours per week. Yes, you also earn $15 per hour. Because you're going to have $12 per hour. So H is going to be represent your hours. And you're required to work at a grocery store for at least 8 hours per week. You also tutor for $15 per hour. You work at a grocery store for at least, you are required to work at a grocery store for at least, oh, this is actually, oh, this isn't inequality. I didn't even read this correctly. You need to earn at least $150 per week. Okay, so there are 3 inequalities. Dang it, I'm going to go back through this. I did not read this question through. I want to make sure I give this person a good question. So I'm actually going to go through. I got to go and I'm going to work back through this on, and I'll get back through it because there's a couple other things I want to add on to this. So I'll get back to your question. I apologize if you submitted it, but there's 2 other things I want to work through on this, and I don't want to go through on the stream because now I have a brain fart. So it's going to take me a second to clear my brain so I can work through this, because what I was originally going to do was not what I'm now reading the question. So that's why you always read through the questions slowly and then you recognize. So I need to graph this out. But I don't want to go through that right now. So I'm going to take a break. But I'm not going to take a break from your guys' questions because I have a couple more questions that came on. So let's go ahead and go through them. And then next week, I will plan on, if you guys submitted a question to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, I'm going to try to add on anywhere from 5 to 10, and I'll be able to get to your guys' questions. Let's see, anything else? Yeah, in 12th grade, I'm seeing you streaming. I'm currently in business calculus and would like an explanation on critical numbers, max and min extrema. I have a nightmare trying to visualize a problem with a Venn diagram. If you have questions specifically on at least your critical numbers, exactly, your critical numbers are going to be your extrema that we're going to look for, and that's going to come in with your derivative tests and everything like that. But if you have something specific, send it to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. Submit it to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. Therefore, I can take a look at it. Study. Can you place face portraits, please? If you have a specific question, then go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at it. So going from there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to end the stream with this, but I have a lot more math questions for you guys that I'm looking forward to add on. If you guys have any more questions throughout the week, or you got your tests and everything else coming up, then feel free, guys, to go ahead and submit them. And I look forward to checking you guys out next week. Cheers.